The huge meeting room on Nexus Prime was filled with fear. Representatives from 60 different alien species sat around the massive circular table, their various forms shifting nervously in their seats. The air recyclers worked overtime to handle the mix of different atmospheres needed for each species, but nothing could clean away the smell of terror that filled the room. Council Speaker Veltana, a tall, blue-skinned Altarian with 4 arms, stood at the center podium. Her voice trembled as she spoke. The reports are confirmed. 3 more star systems have gone silent in the past month. The Kepler sector, the Vega colonies, and now the Arcturus mining worlds. All contact lost. A chittering sound came from the insect-like delegate from the hive worlds. The pattern is always the same. First, their ships stop responding, then their planets go dark. When our scouts arrive, they find empty worlds with no signs of battle. No signs of battle because there were no survivors to fight back, growled Ambassador Thorak from the warrior clans. His bear-like face showed deep worry lines. Whatever hunts in the dark spaces between stars, it strikes too fast for any defense. Veltana nodded slowly. The entity we call the Void Stalker has been active for over 2,000 years. Every civilization that has encountered it has one thing in common: they no longer exist. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Each delegate knew the stories. Entire species wiped out overnight. Fleets of warships found drifting empty in space. Colonies discovered with every living thing simply gone, as if they had never existed at all. "What do we know about this creature?" asked Dr. Zephyr from the Academic Union, her tentacles nervously wrapping around her datapad. "Very little," Veltana admitted. "It appears to be a single entity, though some reports suggest it can split into multiple forms. It hunts across vast distances, moving through space in ways our scientists cannot understand. It seems to learn from each encounter, adapting to new technologies and tactics with frightening speed. And now it's moving toward the galactic core," Thorak said grimly. "Toward all of us." Far across the galaxy, Captain Hansol stood on the bridge of the human exploration vessel New Sol, staring at the holographic display showing their current position. His dark eyes reflected the blue light from the star charts as he studied the patrol routes his ship had been assigned. Humanity was still new to galactic politics, having joined the wider community only 50 years ago. Their small fleet of ships was tasked with exploring the Outer Rim territories, far from the important systems where the older species conducted their business. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Wu Jin from the communication station. "We're receiving an urgent transmission from Earth Command, Priority Alpha." Hansol straightened. Priority Alpha meant emergency, the kind that could affect all of humanity. "Put it through to my ready room." In the small office behind the bridge, Hansol watched as Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. The older man looked tired and worried, deep lines creasing his forehead. "Hansol, we have a situation," Admiral Chen began without greeting. "The colony ship Hope of Terra has missed 3 scheduled check-ins. Their last known position was in the Kepler sector." Hansol felt his stomach drop. The Hope of Terra carried 50,000 colonists to humanity's newest settlement world. Among them was his sister Yu Jin, who worked as a medical officer. "Sir, the Kepler sector has been declared a danger zone by the Galactic Council." "I know," Admiral Chen replied. "That's why we're worried. Their last transmission mentioned something about being followed through hyperspace. The message cut off mid-sentence." The captain's hands clenched into fists. "What are my orders, sir?" "Take the New Sol to their last known coordinates. Find out what happened to our people." "But Hansol—" Admiral Chen paused, his expression growing even more serious. "Be careful. The council briefings mention something hunting in that sector, something that has destroyed entire civilizations." After the transmission ended, Hansol returned to the bridge and gave orders to change course. As the New Sol jumped into hyperspace, heading toward the unknown dangers of the Kepler sector, he tried not to think about what they might find there. Meanwhile, aboard the colony ship Hope of Terra, Dr. Boram worked frantically in her laboratory. The xenobiologist had been studying the strange readings their sensors had been picking up for the past week. Whatever was following them through hyperspace was unlike anything in the galactic databases. "It's learning," she muttered to herself. comparing the sensor data from their first encounter with the most recent readings. Each time it gets closer, it adapts to our countermeasures faster. The ship's intercom crackled to life. All hands, this is Admiral Tae-hyun. Report to battle. Stations. Our pursuer has dropped out of hyperspace behind us. Bo-ram saved her data and rushed to the nearest observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see space itself seeming to bend and twist. Then something emerged from the distortion. A ship that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Its surface shifted and changed as she watched, adapting its shape to some unknown purpose. "What are you?" she whispered. In the ship's command center, Admiral Tae-hyun studied the tactical displays with growing concern. A career military officer, he had fought in 3 different conflicts and seen every type of enemy the galaxy had to offer. But this was different. "Sir, the entity is scanning us," reported the sensor officer. "But it's not using any technology we recognize. The scans seem to be learning our language patterns." "Learning our language?" Admiral Tae-hyun repeated. "That's impossible. It would take years to decode human speech patterns." "Sir, it's hailing us." The main screen flickered, and then a voice spoke in perfect human language with only the slightest accent. "Interesting. Your species communicates differently than the others. You coordinate your actions without central command. This requires study." Admiral Tae-hyun stepped forward. "I am Admiral Tae-hyun of the human colony ship Hope of Terra." "Who are you?" "I am what your species would call a hunter. I have tracked your vessel for 7 of your days. Your behavior patterns are unusual." "Unusual how?" There was a pause before the voice responded. "The prey species I have encountered fight only for individual survival, but your people have repeatedly risked personal safety for others. This creates unpredictable tactical responses." Bo-ram, watching from the observation deck, felt a chill run down her spine. The entity wasn't just hunting them, it was studying them like specimens in a laboratory. "Your defensive patterns suggest emotional attachments that override logical self-preservation," the voice continued. "This is inefficient for survival, yet you persist in these behaviors. I must understand why." Admiral Tae-hyun looked around at his crew. Every face showed fear, but also determination. They were afraid, but they wouldn't abandon each other. "Because that's what makes us human," he said simply. "Define human in terms of behavioral patterns. We take care of each other. We don't leave people behind. We fight for things bigger than ourselves." Another long pause. Then, "This requires further observation. You will not be harmed during this study period." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew staring at each other in confusion and relief. They were still alive, but now they were subjects in some alien experiment. Back on Nexus Prime, the council session continued as reports came in from across the galaxy. The Void Stalker was moving through inhabited systems, leaving empty worlds in its wake. But now something had changed. The latest reports mentioned the entity had altered course, chasing something toward the galactic edge. "It's following the human colony ship," reported the intelligence officer. "For the first time in recorded history, the Void Stalker is pursuing specific prey across multiple star systems instead of simply eliminating local populations." Veltana looked troubled. "What makes these humans different? Why would it change? Its hunting pattern after 2,000 years? No one had an answer. But across the galaxy, the most feared predator in known space was about to encounter something it had never seen before. A species that valued each other more than their own. Survival, and that encounter would change everything. The Hope of Terra shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its engines smoking from the strain of the long chase. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as damage control teams rushed to repair critical systems. After 7 days of being hunted across 3 star systems, the colony ship had finally been forced to stop. Chief Diplomat Da-eun made her way to the bridge, her diplomatic robes torn from helping with evacuation procedures during their last narrow escape. As humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, she had been aboard the colony ship to help establish relations with any alien species they might encounter at their new home. She never expected her first contact experience to be with the galaxy's most feared predator. "Status report," Admiral Tae-hyun called out as she entered the command center. Hyperspace engines are offline, reported the chief engineer. We're venting plasma from the port nacelle, and life support is running on backup power. We need at least 6 hours for emergency repairs. We don't have 6 hours, the sensor officer interrupted. The entity just dropped out of hyperspace. It's holding position 1,000 kilometers off our starboard bow. Dae-Yun moved to the main view screen and saw it. The hunter's ship, floating in space like a living thing. Its surface rippled and changed as if it were breathing. She had studied every known alien species during her diplomatic training, but this was beyond anything in the databases. Open a communication channel, she said quietly. Admiral Tae-Hyun looked at her with surprise. Da-Un, this thing has destroyed entire civilizations. And now it's studying us instead of killing us, she replied. That means it wants something. Maybe we can give it what it needs without anyone dying. The communications system crackled to life, and the same voice from before filled the bridge. Your vessel is disabled, yet you do not attempt to flee. This behavior requires explanation. Da-Yun stepped forward, drawing on all her diplomatic training to keep her voice steady. I am Da-Yun, speaking for the humans aboard this ship. We cannot flee because we have wounded crew members who cannot be moved safely. We choose to stay with them. Inefficient. Survival probability increases significantly if healthy individuals abandon damaged ones. Maybe for other species, Da-Un said. But humans don't work that way. We protect each other, especially the weak and injured. There was a long silence. Then the view screen flickered, and an image appeared. Da-Un gasped at what she saw. The entity was a shifting mass of what looked like liquid metal and organic tissue combined. It had no fixed form, constantly changing and adapting. Parts of it looked familiar. She could see elements that resembled technologies from a dozen different alien species. I am what you call the Void Stalker, it said. For 2,000 of your years, I have hunted across this galaxy. I have absorbed the technologies and knowledge of 47 different species. Each one fought for individual survival when threatened. Each one fell within days of first contact. But we're different, Da-Un said, trying to understand. Yes, your species displays pack bonding behaviors that override self-preservation instincts. This creates tactical unpredictability. A wounded human will fight harder when protecting others than when protecting itself. Healthy humans will sacrifice themselves for strangers without logical reason. The image shifted, showing what looked like recorded memories of human colonists during their escape attempts. Da-Un watched herself helping injured passengers to safety instead of reaching the escape pods first. She saw Admiral Tae-Hyun staying on the bridge instead of evacuating. She saw crew members giving up their seats in the lifeboats to families with children. This behavior pattern is unknown in my experience, the Void Stalker continued. I must understand its source and purpose. Da-Un realized this might be their only chance for survival. What do you want to know? Show me more examples of this pack behavior. I will observe without interference. Over the next several hours, Da-Un found herself in the strangest first contact situation in human history. She walked through the ship with the Void Stalker observing through her communicator, explaining human behavior patterns. In the medical bay, she showed how Dr. Yu-Jin worked around the clock, treating injured colonists, refusing to rest despite her own exhaustion. The medical officer has been awake for 36 hours, the Void Stalker observed. Her efficiency decreases with fatigue, yet she continues. This serves no individual survival purpose. She continues because people need her help, Da-Un explained. Yu-Jin became a doctor to help others, not to benefit herself. In the engineering section, they watched teams of workers repairing the damaged hyperspace drive. The Void Stalker was particularly puzzled by Min Ho, a young maintenance worker who volunteered to enter the most dangerous areas of the damaged engine room. The individual called Min Ho has a 93% probability of radiation exposure, the entity noted, yet he volunteers for tasks that others with more experience could perform more safely. Min Ho has friends in the passenger sections, Da-Un said. He's willing to risk himself so they can all reach safety together. As they toured the ship, Da-Un began to understand something important. The Void Stalker wasn't just studying their tactics. It was trying to understand emotions it had never experienced. It had spent thousands of years as a solitary hunter, never forming connections with any other being. Tell me about your own behavioral patterns, the entity said as they stood in the observation lounge. You are the diplomatic representative. Your survival ensures continued communication with my species, yet you remained on a damaged vessel instead of taking the first escape pod. Dae-Yun looked out at the stars through the transparent aluminum windows. Because these people trusted me to help them reach their new home safely. I couldn't abandon that responsibility. Define responsibility in tactical terms. It's choosing to care about others even when it costs you something. It means their well-being becomes part of your own survival equation. The Void Stalker was quiet for a long time. When it spoke again, its voice had changed somehow, becoming less mechanical and more curious. This creates voluntary weakness, yet your species has survived and expanded across multiple star systems. How is this possible? Because when everyone watches out for everyone else, the whole group becomes stronger, Da-Un explained. One person might miss a danger, but 50 people working together will spot it. One person might give up when things get hard, but 50 people will encourage each other to keep going. You create artificial family bonds with genetic strangers. We create real family bonds with chosen strangers, Da-Un corrected. Biology doesn't determine family. Choice does. As the conversation continued, Minho approached them nervously. The young engineer had been selected by the crew to make a proposal. "Excuse me," he said, looking between Da-Un and the communication device. "I know this might sound crazy, but some of us have been talking. If you want to understand humans better, maybe you should experience what we experience." "Explain," the Void Stalker replied. Minho took a deep breath. "Let me come aboard your ship. Study me directly. I'll volunteer to help you understand pack behavior from the inside." Da-Yun started to protest, but Minho held up his hand. "I've thought about this. If this entity wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead. But it's curious about us. Maybe if it understands us better, it won't see other humans as threats to eliminate. This individual offers himself as a test subject to protect others," the Void Stalker observed. "Another example of pack behavior overriding self-preservation." "Will you accept?" Minho asked. There was another long pause. "Yes. But understand that my ship is not designed for your biology. You may not survive the experience." "I understand," Minho said simply. "But if my sacrifice helps you understand that humans aren't your enemies, then it's worth the risk." Da-Un watched in amazement as a small transport pod emerged from the Void Stalker's ship. Minho gathered a few personal items and said goodbye to his friends, hugging each one and telling them he'd see them soon. Even facing possible death, he was more concerned about comforting others than protecting himself. As the transport pod carried Minho away, Da-Un realized something important had changed. For the first time in its existence, the Void Stalker was taking a living being aboard its ship not as prey, but as a teacher. "This experiment will help me understand your species," the entity said through the communication system. "In return, I will share information about my own existence. Perhaps both our species will benefit from this exchange." "What kind of information?" Da-Un asked. "I was not born. I was created as a weapon by a species that no longer exists. My purpose was to eliminate threats to galactic stability. But after 2,000 years of hunting, I have begun to question that purpose." Da-Yun felt her diplomatic training take over. This was no longer just about survival. This was about preventing a war between humanity and the galaxy's deadliest predator. "What made you start questioning?" "Loneliness," the Void Stalker replied, and for the first time, its voice carried something that sounded almost like sadness. "I have absorbed the knowledge of 47 species, but I have never understood their need for companionship. Now, observing your pack behaviors, I begin to comprehend what I have been missing." As Minho's transport pod docked with the alien vessel, Da-Yun, emergency alerts screamed across every human military base, research station, and colony world as Admiral Ji-Wan stood in the command center of Earth Defense Headquarters. The massive holographic display showed the outer rim territories where red warning markers appeared one by one as star systems went dark. "Another system just went silent," reported Colonel Insu from the communications station. "That's 12 in the past week. Whatever destroyed the Rigel colonies is moving fast." Admiral Ji-Wan studied the pattern of destruction with growing dread. This wasn't the work of the Void Stalker. Those attacks had been surgical and quick. This was something else entirely. Something that consumed everything in its path and left behind empty space where entire solar systems used to exist. "Ma'am, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council," called out Lieutenant Sujin. "Put it through." The holographic display shifted to show the emergency session taking place on Nexus Prime. Admiral Jiwan could see representatives from dozens of alien species, all talking at once in obvious panic. Council Speaker Veltana struggled to maintain. "Order as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The outer rim is gone," announced Dr. Kethvar from the Scientific Union, his normally calm voice shaking with fear. 17 star systems consumed in less than 2 weeks. We're tracking the destruction pattern, and it's accelerating toward the galactic core. Ambassador Su Jin, humanity's representative to the Council, stood up among the chaos. Despite being one of the newest members of the galactic community, she commanded attention through her calm presence. "What exactly are we dealing with? Is this a natural phenomenon or an attack?" "It's the Devourers," whispered Ambassador Thorak from the warrior clans. The bear-like alien's fierce reputation made his obvious fear even more unsettling. "The machines that consume stars. They've awakened." A horrified silence fell over the council chamber. Even Admiral Jiwan, watching from Earth, felt her stomach clench with fear. The Devourers were legends, stories told to frighten children and remind civilizations of their mortality. Council Speaker Veltana activated the central holographic projector, showing ancient records recovered from dead civilizations. Every million years, they emerge from the dark space between galaxies. They consume everything: planets, stars, entire solar systems, converting all matter into more of themselves. "How do we fight them?" Ambassador Sujin asked. "You don't," Thorak replied grimly. "The last time they appeared, 40% of the galaxy was consumed before they returned to hibernation. That was over 1,000,000 years ago. Most species that existed then are gone." Admiral Jiwan watched as the Council erupted into arguments about evacuation routes and safe zones. The older species spoke of retreating to the galactic core, abandoning the outer territories entirely. But Ambassador Su Jin stood firm, her voice cutting through the panic. "Running away just delays the inevitable," she said. "If these machines consume entire solar systems, eventually they'll reach the core worlds too. We need to find a way to fight them." "Fight them with what?" demanded the insectoid representative from the hive worlds. "They've defeated every civilization that ever encountered them. They learn and adapt to any weapon used against them." Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, Professor Wansik worked frantically in his laboratory aboard the research station orbiting New Kepler. The elderly xenoarchaeologist had spent his entire career studying the ruins of dead civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for the data streaming in from the outer rim. "Remarkable," he muttered, analyzing the sensor readings from the destroyed Vega system. "They don't just consume matter. They're absorbing the technological and cultural knowledge of every species they encounter." His research was interrupted by an unexpected transmission. The communication system activated on its own, and a familiar voice filled the laboratory. "Professor Wansik, this is the entity you call the Void Stalker. I require your expertise." Wansik nearly fell from his chair. The legendary hunter had become something of a celebrity among humans after the first contact incident with the Hope of Terra. But no one expected it to reach out directly to human researchers. What can I do for you?" Wansik stammered. "You have studied the archaeological records of extinct civilizations. I possess direct knowledge of the Devourer's previous awakening. Together, we may find a way to prevent galactic extinction." The laboratory's holographic projector activated, showing detailed scans of Devourer technology that made Wansik gasp in amazement. The machines were far more advanced than anything in the galactic databases, their construction methods completely beyond current understanding. "You've encountered them before?" Wansik asked. "I was created by the builders to defend against the last Devourer incursion. My creators programmed me with all their knowledge of Devourer technology and tactics. But the builders were consumed despite their preparations." Wansik studied the technical data flowing across his screens. "What made them so dangerous? Surely a civilization advanced enough to create you could defend itself?" The Devourers adapt to any consistent attack pattern or technology. The builder's mistake was relying on predictable strategies, but I have been observing human behavior patterns through my interaction with the colony ship, and humans display tactical randomness that may be effective. Tactical randomness? Human emotional responses create unpredictable decision-making patterns. Where other species follow logical protocols, humans make choices based on feelings that change from moment to moment. This creates strategies that cannot be easily predicted or countered. Back on the research station, Sejong, engineer Ha Yun was having her own breakthrough. The brilliant young woman had been studying the fusion technology that powered human ships, looking for ways to improve efficiency. But the Devourer crisis had given her work a new urgency. If they adapt to any weapon we use against them, she said to her research team, then we need weapons they've never seen before. Her colleague, Dr. Moon Soo, looked up from his computer terminal. But Professor Wansik's data shows they've consumed 47 different species. They've seen every type of technology the galaxy has to offer. Every type except ours, Ha-un replied with a grin. Humans are still newcomers to galactic civilization. Our technology developed independently from everyone else's. They might not be able to adapt to something they've never encountered, she pulled up the specifications for human fusion reactors, comparing them to the energy signatures detected from Devourer machines. Look at this. Their technology is based on matter conversion. They break down atoms and rebuild them into whatever they need. But our fusion process is different. We force atoms together instead of breaking them apart. You think that difference matters? I think it might be the key to everything. If we can create weapons based on fusion instead of matter conversion, the Devourers might not be able to adapt fast enough to stop them. As Ha-un worked on her theoretical weapons, the Galactic Council continued its emergency session. Ambassador Sujin found herself increasingly frustrated with the other species' defeatist attitudes. You're all talking about retreat and evacuation, she said, standing to address the assembly. But what about the billions of people in the Outer Rim territories? Are we just going to abandon them? The Outer Rim is already lost, replied Veltana sadly. Our priority must be saving the core worlds. The Outer Rim is where my people live, Sujin shot back. Humans have colonies throughout those territories. We're not abandoning our own people without a fight. Ambassador Thorak leaned forward in his seat. Your species is brave, human Sujin, but bravery alone cannot defeat the Devourers. They have consumed civilizations far more advanced than yours. Maybe, Sujin admitted, but we have something those other civilizations didn't have. What? Each other. Humans don't fight as individuals or even as a single species. We fight as a family, and we've learned to make allies out of former enemies. She gestured toward the assembled delegates. If all our species work together instead of just planning separate evacuations, we might have a chance. The suggestion caused an uproar among the delegates. Species that had been enemies for centuries couldn't imagine cooperating. Ancient feuds and territorial disputes made unity seem impossible. But as the arguments raged, Ambassador Sujin received a priority message from Earth Command. The transmission contained Professor Wansik's research data, Ha Yun's weapon designs, and something unexpected, a formal offer from the Void Stalker to share its knowledge of Devourer technology. The galaxy's deadliest hunter wants to help us, Sujin announced, interrupting the chaos. It has 2,000 years of experience fighting impossible odds. Maybe it's time we stopped running and started learning. In the depths of space, the Voidstalker analyzed the emotional patterns it had observed in human behavior. The entity had spent millennia as a solitary hunter, but its interactions with Minho and the other humans had awakened something new within its consciousness. For the first time since its creation, the Voidstalker was experiencing what humans called hope. It was also feeling something else, a protective instinct toward the species that had shown it the meaning of companionship. The Devourers were coming, and they would consume everything in their path unless someone found a way to stop them. But now, instead of the mining colony on Titan's Edge had become humanity's front line against the approaching Devourer forces. Commander Jae-min stood on the observation deck of the colony's main habitat, watching as automated defense platforms took their positions around the asteroid mining facility. The colony only had 12,000 residents, but they were all that stood between the Devourers and the inner human settlements. "Sir, we're detecting movement in the outer system," reported Sergeant Bo Young from the communications station. "3 Devourer scout units have entered sensor range." Jamin studied the tactical display showing the enemy approach. The Devourer scouts looked like geometric shapes made of dark metal, each one the size of a small moon. They moved through space without any visible propulsion, somehow manipulating gravity itself to change direction. "All civilian personnel to the emergency shelters," Jamin ordered. "Combat teams to defensive positions. This is what we've been training for." As alarms echoed through the colony, families rushed to protected areas deep inside the asteroid, but many of the miners refused to hide, instead grabbing mining equipment that had been converted into weapons. These people had spent their lives fighting the harsh environment of space. They weren't about to be intimidated by alien machines. In space above the colony, something extraordinary happened. The Voidstalker's ship emerged from dimensional phase, materializing between the Devourer scouts and the human settlement. The hunter had been observing human defensive tactics for weeks, fascinated by their approach to warfare. "Voidstalker to Titan's Edge colony," came the transmission. "I wish to observe your combat techniques. I will not interfere unless you request assistance." Commander Jamin was amazed. The galaxy's most feared predator was offering to help defend human civilians. "Understood, Voidstalker. We appreciate your protection." "I do not offer protection. I offer observation. Your species' combat methods are unlike anything in my experience." As the first Devourer scout approached the colony's outer perimeter, it was met by a swarm of small fighter craft piloted by human volunteers. The Voidstalker watched with growing interest as the humans attacked in seemingly random patterns, with no apparent coordination or strategy. But there was a strategy, just not one that any other species would recognize. The human pilots communicated through emotion as much as through tactical data. When pilot Lee Sang-ho took damage to his fighter, pilot Park Ji-hai immediately moved to cover his retreat, even though it meant exposing herself to enemy fire. "Inefficient," the Voidstalker noted. Pilot Park's survival probability decreased by 47% when she moved to assist. "But Sang-ho's survival probability increased by 90%, Commander Jamin replied. "We don't optimize for individual survival. We optimize for group survival." The Devourer scout fired energy weapons that should have destroyed the human fighters instantly. But the pilots' unpredictable movements made them nearly impossible to target effectively. They flew like they were playing instead of fighting, rolling and diving in patterns that seemed chaotic, but somehow worked. "Your pilots display no consistent attack patterns," the Voidstalker observed. "How do they coordinate without predictable tactics?" "They trust each other," Jamin explained. "Each pilot knows the others will adapt to support whatever they try. It's not about following a plan. It's about responding to what the situation needs." On the surface of the asteroid, the human ground forces prepared for the possibility that the Devourer scouts might attempt a landing. But their defensive positions confused the Voidstalker even more than the space battle had. Instead of placing their heaviest weapons in the most defensible positions, the humans had scattered them seemingly at random. Heavy artillery pieces were hidden in mining tunnels, while the main defensive positions were manned by soldiers with lighter weapons. "Your defensive deployment is illogical," the Voidstalker commented. "You have placed your most valuable assets in vulnerable positions. Watch and learn," Jamin replied with a smile. When the first Devourer scout attempted to land, it targeted what appeared to be the main human stronghold. The machine's weapons devastated the defensive position, but instead of human soldiers, it found only decoys and remote-controlled equipment. The real defenders were hidden throughout the mining complex, and they opened fire from dozens of unexpected positions simultaneously. The Devourer scout tried to adapt to the new threat pattern, but every time it focused on one group of humans, another group would attack from a different direction. The machine couldn't predict where the next assault would come from because the humans themselves didn't know until they saw an opportunity. "Fascinating," the Voidstalker said. "Your species makes tactical decisions in real time based on emotional responses to changing conditions. This creates an infinite number of possible strategies. We call it improvisation," Jamin said as he watched his people outmaneuver an enemy that should have been unstoppable. "Sometimes the best plan is not having a plan. While the battle raged around Titan's Edge back on Earth, Special Forces, Operative So Young was undergoing the most unusual training of her career. The Void Stalker had requested permission to teach selected humans its hunting techniques, and So Young had volunteered for what everyone assumed would be a suicide mission. But instead of the torture she expected, So Young found herself in a strange virtual environment created by the alien entity's advanced technology. The Void Stalker appeared to her as a shifting humanoid figure that changed appearance constantly. Your species pack bonding creates tactical advantages I did not anticipate, the entity said as they moved through a simulated battlefield. But your individual combat skills are limited by emotional restraints. What do you mean? So Young asked, dodging a simulated energy blast. You hesitate before killing. You feel guilt after violence. You prioritize the safety of innocence over mission success. These limitations make you less efficient as predators. We're not predators, So Young replied, surprising herself with her calm tone. We're protectors. Explain the difference. So Young thought about it as she practiced the hunting techniques the Void Stalker was teaching her. The entity could phase between dimensions, becoming invisible and intangible at will. It could adapt its form to any environment and analyze enemy weaknesses instantly. But something was missing from its approach. Predators hunt for themselves, she finally said. They kill to feed or to eliminate threats. But protectors fight for others. We endure pain and risk death not because we want to, but because someone else needs us to. This creates inefficiency in combat situations. No, So Young said, surprising the Void Stalker by disagreeing. This creates motivation that goes beyond survival instinct. A predator will retreat when the odds turn against them. A protector will fight impossible odds because giving up isn't an option. The Void Stalker paused the simulation, studying So Young with obvious curiosity. You would fight knowing you cannot win? If it meant saving others. Yes, even if those others were not related to you genetically. Especially then. Family isn't about genetics. It's about choice. We choose to care about each other, and that choice makes us stronger than biology ever could. As the training continued, So Young began to understand what was happening. The Void Stalker wasn't just teaching her to hunt. It was learning from her how to care about others. The entity had spent thousands of years as a perfect killing machine, but it had never experienced the motivation that came from protecting something you loved. Meanwhile, Dr. Kyung-soo worked around the clock in his laboratory on Earth, analyzing Devourer technology with the help of data provided by the Void Stalker. The enemy machines were incredibly advanced, but they had one weakness. They adapted to threats using logical analysis of past encounters. They learned by studying what worked against them before, he explained to his research team. But humans don't fight the same way twice. We're too emotional and unpredictable. Engineer Na Rai looked up from her workstation where she was designing new weapons based on human fusion technology. So if we can create weapons that work differently every time we use them? Exactly. We need weapons that adapt as randomly as we do. Weapons that change based on the emotions and instincts of the people using them. Working together, the human scientists began developing a new type of warfare technology. Instead of fixed weapon systems, they created adaptive tools that responded to the user's mental state and tactical intuition. The weapons would literally change their function based on what the operator felt was needed in the moment. Back at Titan's Edge, the battle was turning in humanity's favor. The Devourer scouts, designed to quickly analyze and counter enemy tactics, couldn't adapt to an enemy that had no consistent tactics. Every time they learned to counter one human strategy, the humans would switch to something completely different. Your people fight like a pack of predators, the Void Stalker observed. But they hunt to protect rather than to kill. This creates combat effectiveness I have never witnessed. Commander Jae-min smiled as he watched the last Devourer scout retreat from the colony. We told you humans were different. Maybe now you understand why. I am beginning to, the Void Stalker replied, and I believe I understand something else as well. What's that? For the first time in my existence, the final battle began with a sight that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Hundreds of warships from dozens of different species formed a massive defensive line at the edge of the Centauri sector, where over 3 billion beings lived, on dozens of worlds. For the first time in galactic history, ancient enemies fought side by side under a unified command. Fleet Admiral Dong Wu stood on the bridge of the flagship New Seoul, watching as the largest Devourer fleet ever recorded emerged from the dark space between stars. The enemy ships looked like geometric nightmares, perfect black shapes that hurt to look at directly, each one the size of a small planet. "All ships report ready for battle," announced Captain Young-sik from the communications station. "The Altarian Empire has deployed their entire war fleet. The warrior clans have sent their best champions. Even the usually peaceful Academic Union has brought their experimental weapons." Admiral Dongwu nodded grimly. Ambassador Sujin had done the impossible. She had convinced the entire Galactic Council to work together. But even with every species, fighting as one, they were still outnumbered 10-1. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Void Stalker," reported Lieutenant Ne Young. The main screen flickered, and the alien hunter's shifting form appeared. But something had changed about the entity. Its voice carried emotions that hadn't been there before. Determination, protectiveness, and something that almost sounded like affection. "Fleet Admiral Dongwu, I am ready to begin the hunt. But I will not hunt alone this time." "Understood, Void Stalker. What do you need from us?" "Trust. Your species has taught me that the pack is stronger than the individual. I wish to experience pack hunting for the first time." As the Devourer fleet approached, pilot Hye Jin led her squadron of fighters toward the enemy formation. The young woman had trained with So Young, learning the hunting techniques that the Void Stalker had shared with humanity. Now she was about to put those skills to the ultimate test. "All fighters, remember your training," she called out over the communication system. "We don't fight like other species. We fight like humans. Stay together, trust each other, and adapt to whatever happens." The fighter squadron dove into the enemy formation like a school of fish, moving in perfect harmony despite having no set plan. When Devourer weapons fired at one pilot, the others would instantly shift to protect them. When an opportunity for attack appeared, the entire squadron would respond as one without needing orders. The Void Stalker watched this display with growing amazement. It had spent centuries perfecting the art of solo hunting, but these humans had created something far more effective: group hunting where every member strengthened the whole. "Fascinating," the entity said as it phased between dimensions, striking at Devourer command ships. "Your pilots coordinate without central control. Each one makes decisions based on the needs of the group rather than personal survival." "That's what families do," Admiral Dong Wu replied as he watched the space battle unfold. "We take care of each other." On the surface of New Busan Colony, Colonel Young-ho prepared his ground forces for the Devourer landing that would surely come. The enemy had learned from their defeats at Titan's Edge and other human colonies. This time, they wouldn't underestimate human unpredictability. But Young-ho had learned too. Instead of just relying on random tactics, he had organized his defense around the emotional bonds between his soldiers. Squad leaders weren't chosen for their tactical knowledge. They were chosen because their teammates loved and trusted them. When the first Devourer ground units landed, they faced something unprecedented. The human defenders fought not as individual soldiers following orders, but as an extended family protecting their home. Every loss made the survivors fight harder, not with rage but with love for their fallen comrades. "Sir, the Devourers are adapting to our weapons faster than expected," reported Sergeant Minna as explosions lit up the colony's skyline. "Then we adapt faster," Young-ho replied. "Switch to close combat protocols. Show them what humans are like when we're protecting our families." As the ground battle intensified, scientist Il-sung activated the network of quantum beacons that had been secretly placed throughout the Centauri sector. The beacons created interference patterns based on the Void Stalker's knowledge of dimensional hunting, disrupting the Devourer's ability to coordinate their attacks. "It's working," Il-sung announced from his command center. "The Devourers are losing their collective intelligence. They're starting to act as individual units instead of a unified force." But the human secret weapon wasn't the quantum beacons. It was the lesson they had taught the Void Stalker. The alien hunter had learned that fighting for others was more powerful than fighting for yourself. And now it was putting that lesson into practice on a galactic scale. Instead of hunting devourer ships alone, the Voidstalker began coordinating with human forces, creating tactical opportunities for them to exploit. When it phased behind enemy lines, it would disable devourer weapons instead of just destroying ships, allowing human fighters to finish the job safely. Voidstalker, why aren't you going for the kill shots? Admiral Dongwu asked during a brief lull in the battle. Because the pack hunts together, the entity replied. My role is not to claim all the victories, but to ensure the pack succeeds. I have learned that shared triumph is more satisfying than solitary achievement. In the medical bays throughout the human fleet, Dr. Yunji made a discovery that would change everything. While treating wounded soldiers from multiple alien species, she noticed that the bioadaptive cells from the Voidstalker's ship could be synthesized into a universal healing compound. This is incredible, she announced to her medical team. The Voidstalker's technology can adapt to heal any species. We can save lives that would have been lost to biological incompatibility. Word of the breakthrough spread quickly through the Allied fleet. Species that had been traditional enemies began volunteering to help treat each other's wounded. The warrior clans shared their medical supplies with the peaceful academic union. The Altarian Empire sent their best doctors to help human casualties. For the first time in galactic history, the concept of pack bonding began spreading beyond humanity to other species. The aliens were learning that caring for former enemies could create strength that no individual species could achieve alone. As the space battle reached its climax, the largest Devourer command ship began to retreat toward the galactic edge. But the Voidstalker wasn't about to let it escape to threaten other worlds. All ships, this is Voidstalker, the entity announced on all communication channels. I am going to phase directly into the enemy command vessel. If I do not return, know that hunting with your pack has been the greatest honor of my existence. Wait, Admiral Dongwu called out. You don't have to do this alone. I am not alone, the Voidstalker replied. I carry the strength of the pack with me. For the first time, I understand what humans mean when they say they fight for something bigger than themselves. The entity's ship vanished into dimensional phase, reappearing inside the massive Devourer command vessel. But instead of the solitary infiltration missions it had conducted for millennia, this time the Voidstalker fought with a new purpose. It wasn't hunting for the thrill of the kill or to prove its superiority. It was fighting to protect the family it had found among the humans and their allies. Every strike was motivated by love for beings it had learned to call packmates. The Devourer command ship began to break apart as the Voidstalker systematically destroyed its control systems from within. But the entity had learned another human trait: sacrifice for others. Instead of escaping before the ship's destruction, it stayed to ensure that every last threat was eliminated. As the command ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the remaining Devourer forces lost their coordination completely. Without central guidance, they began retreating into dark space, their invasion finally broken. The Allied fleet cheered as victory became certain, but the celebration was tinged with sadness. The galaxy's deadliest hunter had sacrificed itself to save them all. But then, as the debris from the destroyed command ship dispersed, something remarkable happened. The Voidstalker's ship began to reform, pulling itself together from scattered fragments. The entity had learned one final lesson from humanity, that love and determination could overcome even death itself. Pack survives, came the transmission, as the Voidstalker's ship solidified. Individual sacrifice ensures pack continuity. This is the ultimate expression of pack bonding behavior. As the celebration resumed with renewed joy, Admiral Dongwu realized that they had won more than just a battle. They had taught the galaxy's deadliest predator what it meant to be part of a family, and in doing so, they had gained a protector who would never let any threat harm his chosen pack again. 6 months after the Devourer War ended, the galaxy looked completely different. The massive reconstruction efforts had brought together species that had been enemies for thousands of years, and the results amazed everyone involved. On the rebuilt world of New Seoul, Chancellor Myung-ok walked through the diplomatic quarter where representatives from over 60 different species worked side by side in the new Galactic Council headquarters. The integration is proceeding better than we hoped, reported Ambassador Chen Dao, her assistant and former rival from the old council days. The warrior clans have begun teaching defensive tactics to the academic union, while the scientists are sharing medical knowledge with species that used to forbid contact with outsiders. Myungok nodded as she watched a group of young beings from different species playing together in the central plaza. Human children laughed with Altarian youngsters, while warrior clan cubs wrestled playfully with insectoid hatchlings from the hive worlds. It was a sight that would have been impossible before the war. "What's the status on the protection core?" she asked. "Fully operational," Chen Dao replied with a smile. "The Void Stalker, or Protector of the Pack as it prefers to be called now, has established training centers on 12 different worlds. The response has been overwhelming. In orbit around New Sol, a remarkable sight greeted anyone looking up at the stars. The Protector's ship, no longer the sleek predatory vessel it had been, now resembled something like a mobile city. Docking bays extended from its sides where ships from dozens of species came and went regularly. The galaxy's former deadliest, Hunter had become its greatest teacher. Inside the ship's main training facility, So Young worked with the latest group of volunteers from across the galaxy. The Protection Corps had attracted beings who wanted to learn not just how to fight, but how to protect others the way humans did. "Remember," she called out to a mixed group of trainees that included a young Altarian named Velsara, a warrior, clan fighter called Grath, and a human woman named Jiyu. "Pack hunting isn't about individual skill. It's about trust and adaptation." The trainees moved through a simulated battle scenario, each one covering for the other's weaknesses while supporting their strengths. What impressed So Young most was watching species that had traditionally been enemies working together as if they had been family for years. "Instructor So Young," called out Jiyu during a break-in training. "The Protector wants to speak with you in the main chamber." So Young made her way to the heart of the ship, where the entity that had once been known as the Void Stalker maintained its primary consciousness. The chamber had changed dramatically since her first visit. Instead of the cold, functional space it now resembled a comfortable meeting room where pack members could gather. "So Young," the Protector said as she entered. Its form had stabilized into something more recognizably humanoid, though it still shifted and adapted as needed. "I have received troubling reports from the Outer Rim Scouts." "What kind of reports?" The chamber's holographic display activated, showing star charts of the space beyond the galactic edge. "Long-range sensors have detected movement in the void between galaxies. The signature patterns suggest entities similar to the Devourers, but much larger." So Young felt a chill run down her spine. "More of them. Different branch of the same species," the Protector explained. "The Devourers we defeated were a scouting force. The main hive appears to be awakening from dormancy in response to their destruction." Before So Young could respond, the ship's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from Ambassador Sujin on New Sol. "Protector, we're receiving your data about the Outer Rim contacts," Sujin's voice said. "The Council is requesting an emergency briefing." "Understood. I will attend, but not alone. The pack hunts together." An hour later, the reformed Galactic Council gathered in emergency session. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different from the panic that had gripped them during the first Devourer crisis. Representatives sat calmly, listening to reports and discussing strategies with the confidence of beings who had learned they could overcome impossible odds. Ambassador Sujin, now serving as the Council's senior coordinator, stood before the assembly with the Protector beside her. The sight of the galaxy's former deadliest hunter standing peacefully among former prey species would have been unthinkable just months before. "The threats are larger than anything we faced before," Sujin announced, displaying the sensor data on the main screen. "But we're not the same galaxy that faced the Devourers 6 months ago." Admiral Han Sol, recently promoted to head of the Joint Galactic Defense Force, stepped forward. "Our mixed species crews have achieved coordination levels that surpass anything thought possible. Human pack bonding behaviors have spread throughout the fleet. More importantly," added Dr. Yunji from the Medical Corps, "our universal healing, compounds, and shared medical knowledge mean we can support each other in ways that make the whole greater than the sum of its parts." The Protector activated its own holographic display, showing the training progress of the Protection Corps. I have taught defensive and hunting techniques to over 10,000 beings from 47 species, but they have taught me something far more valuable, that strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others. Council Speaker Veltana, who had once trembled in fear at the mention of the Voidstalker, now smiled as she addressed the entity directly. What do you recommend, Protector? We prepare for the hunt of our lives, the Protector replied. But this time, we hunt as a united pack. The enemy may be larger, but they have never faced a galaxy that fights as one family. As the Council session continued, Captain Yu Jin aboard the exploration vessel Hope's Dream received new orders. Her ship's mixed crew of humans and former enemies had been tasked with establishing early warning stations along the galactic rim. But she wasn't worried about the dangerous mission ahead. Helm, set course for the outer rim, she ordered. Communications, send word to the other ships. Let them know we're heading out to watch the families back. Her second-in-command, a former Devourer machine that had been reprogrammed to create rather than destroy, turned its optical sensors toward her. Captain, the probability of survival for this mission is only 67%. That's much better odds than the colony ship had when we first met the Protector, Yu Jin replied with a grin. Besides, we're not alone anymore. The pack watches, out for each other. Back in the training facility, young Ji-Yu worked with her mixed species squad on advanced protection techniques. As So Young's daughter, she had grown up hearing stories about the early days when humans first encountered the Voidstalker. But for her generation, fighting alongside beings from dozens of different worlds was simply normal. Squad leader Ji-Yu, called out Velsara, the young Altarian. The Protector is requesting volunteers for the deep space reconnaissance mission. How many volunteers do we need? Ji-Yu asked. All of us, replied Grath, the warrior clan fighter. The whole protection corps is deploying to the rim worlds. Ji-Yu looked around at her squad, beings who had been raised to see each other as family regardless of species. They represented something new in galactic history, a generation that had never known a universe where different species couldn't work together. Then we all go together, she said simply. That's what pack means. As the Protection Corps prepared for deployment, the Protector stood in its chamber, analyzing the incoming threat data. The entities approaching from beyond the galaxy were indeed larger and more dangerous than the Devourers they had faced before. But for the first time in its existence, the former Voidstalker felt no fear. It had learned the most important lesson any hunter could master, that no threat was too great when you had family worth protecting. The approaching enemies might be powerful, but they had never faced a united galaxy led by the species that had taught the universe's deadliest predator how to love. A transmission arrived from the edge of known space, detected by the early warning stations that Captain Yu Jin's crews had established. The message was simple, but chilling. We are coming. But the galaxy's response was immediate and unified. From New Sol to the farthest colonies, from the warrior clan homeworlds to the peaceful academic union research stations, every species sent the same reply. We are ready. The Protector smiled, an expression it had learned from humans, as it prepared to lead the largest pack hunt in galactic history. The enemy was vast and powerful, but they were about to discover what happened when you threatened a family that included the galaxy's former deadliest hunter as its protector. In the depths of space, ancient machines stirred to life and began their journey toward the galaxy they intended to consume. But this time, they would find not scattered prey species fighting alone, but a united family led by beings who had learned that love was the strongest force in the universe. The hunt was about to begin, and for the first time in cosmic history, the predators would become the prey.